and welcome to the February 14th Valentine's Day Planning and Zoning Commission's meeting. Sharon, could we have roll call?
Messina?
Here.
Fleming?
Here.
Ingalls?
Here.
Lutrip? Mandel? McCracken?
Here.
Ford?
Okay. Can you stand with me and do the pledge?
Please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag. States of America,
States of America, and to the republic, which stands who stands under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sorry, that was late, wasn't it?
Can everyone hear me back there? We're okay? All right. I need approval of the January 10th minutes, please.
So move, Mr. Chair.
I have a motion to approve the minutes. I need a second.
I'll second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
At this time, be public comment, anything that's not on the agenda, if anyone wants to address the commission. Okay. Staff comments?
All right, good afternoon, Commissioners. Just a couple of updates for you. So we will have 3 public hearings at our regular March meeting, so that's on the schedule. Today's public hearing is on the short-term rental ordinance. That will also go to City Council next week, so that has been noticed as a second public hearing. And then also just a quick update on our city impact fee update. So Sean and our departments have been working closely with the consultant team on providing them with all the data, and they have been working on the capital improvement plans for police and fire that's part of that process. So everything is underway and moving forward. We'll continue to keep you updated.
Great.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it. Commission comments at this time? Okay, hearing none. We're going to go into an administrative item right now, which is the KCEMSS impact fee request. Go ahead, Sean.
So with opening, I'd like to take a moment to introduce Chief Keeley, representing Kootenai County Emergency Medical Services System, or KCEMSS for short. It's a fire-based ambulance service that provides 911 emergency care and facility-to-facility transfers throughout Kootenai County. All of the fire departments within Kootenai County, including the city of Coeur d'Alene, operate through a network of agencies to provide emergency services in our area. So Planning Commission may be asking, why are we hearing this? So Planning Commission acts as the Development Impact Fee Advisory Committee, and in this case, KCEMSS is looking for a recommendation to City Council for collection and distribution of impact fees. And with that, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Chief Keeley to discuss local services provided by KCEMSS and a request for impact fee collection.
Okay, great, thanks, Sean.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to come and talk to you. I have a very short presentation that kind of outlines where we're at and how we got to where I am standing in front of you. And then I'll be happy to answer any questions that come up during this. So KCMSS is an independent taxing district within Kootenai County. Even though it says Kootenai County in front of our name, we are not part of the county government. We are an independent taxing district. We are the license holder for all EMS services provided in Kootenai County. So everyone who functions in an EMS role within Kootenai County is part of the system, and we license them through the state to allow that to take place. The way the system is set up, KCMSS purchases all the equipment, the ambulances, the cardiac monitors, the equipment used on patients. We hire the medical directors, we set up the protocols, we do the billing, all of that. Then we reimburse the fire departments, the 9 fire departments, for the employees that actually provide the service. So we, the one that affects you most obviously is the City of Coeur d'Alene Fire Department. We provide for 2 ambulances to be staffed by a paramedic and EMT, 24/7, 365, and we reimburse the city for the expenses to hire those people. We provide them with all of the supplies to provide EMS, both from a fire truck as well as an ambulance. We give them the ambulance and all the equipment they need to function. We currently operate with 9 different fire departments in Kootenai County to provide full-time ambulance services. And then we provide as well 3 volunteer agencies that provide quick response or a fire truck to respond. Because of the more rural area, the ambulance is a little bit further away, so they respond with a fire truck and the ambulance comes behind them. We support all 11 fire districts in Kootenai County. I'm sorry, I went the wrong way. I apologize. Why am I here? KCMSS, according to the impact fee statute that was amended 2 years ago, can collect impact fees. This equipment can only be rolling stock or ambulances or equipment that is needed to stock an ambulance that is hard equipment that must last 10 years or buildings. That is all the impact fee statute as far as it relates to EMS and fire can be used for. The problem with this is KCMSS by state law does not have the ability to do to impose impact fees. We collect taxes through the county. We do not have the ability to put forth an impact fee resolution per state code. So we have to go to each of the cities in the county that we serve and ask them to enact the ordinance to collect impact fees for us. And then an intergovernmental agreement to allow those impact fees to be collected and expenses reimbursed and everything that goes along with that. We are only allowed to use impact fee services for new services. This cannot in any way be used for existing services or to improve existing services. So when I kind of go through what we're looking at using our impact fees for, you're going to notice in no way does it talk about the 15 ambulances I currently have functioning or any of the current equipment that I have in service. This is simply to provide new services based on the increase in population within the subdivisions within Kootenai County or within Kootenai County itself. KCMSS employed Galena and Consulting to perform the study that all the information I'm about to give you is based on. They also set up and held the meetings for all of the public meetings that took place. We have to have a board that looks at what we're asking for and whether or not our impact fees seem reasonable for both what we need as well as the overall cost of our impact fees. And we have gone through that process at this point. As of today, all of the cities and Kootenai County are collecting impact fees except for the city of Spirit Lake. They have had some council issues that are more important than us going and asking for impact fees at the moment. We are not only approved, but we have collected from everyone at this point, except Spirit Lake and the city of Coeur d'Alene. KCMSS developed a CIP that outlines the services we believe we would need in the next 10 years to meet the influx of new residents within Kootenai County. That number was arrived at, what that influx looks like was arrived at by using census data, past year's growth data, what is already on the books to be built. It's estimated that growth in Kootenai County will be approximately 69,605 new residents in the next 10 years. This is not broken out by city because we're a county agency, so our impact fee had to be based on what the entire county was expecting, not by each city. That number of people, through a very difficult and confusing mathematical process, works out to be about 30,663 new residential units and an increase of 4,500,000 roughly square feet of new non-residential units. So we have taken that, figured out what we needed to purchase in order to serve that public, divided it out to come to an impact fee, to come to a number that will get us where we need to be. And I'll go through that a little more as we go through this. Those numbers were applied to our CIP, and that's where we came up with our impact fee. One of the things we did as we went through this is we looked at what Kootenai County EMS currently owns that would be impact fee eligible should we be starting from scratch right now. And that's about $13 million worth of equipment that we currently own. That was divided by the current amount of residential units and non-residential square footage, and it works out to be about $164 per residential unit and 8 cents per non-residential square foot that the current residents have paid into the system to get the performance out of the system they're currently receiving. When we did our request for impact fees, we did that math of the number of residential units and non-residential square footage by what we think we need. It worked out to be $132 per residential unit and 7 cents per non-residential square foot. If you look, you can see those numbers are very close to each other. That's one way we looked at to make sure that we weren't either way over or way under in our estimates at where we were at, that what the current population is paid in and what would be the cost to new residents. Very quickly, I'm going to go through what we're asking for. I think it's very important that each subdivision that is looking at collecting impact fees for Kootenai County EMS truly understand what we're asking for and why we're asking for it. And then some of this is impact fee eligible at less than 100% because it's things that we need now and also for the future to serve the influx that's coming in. So we can't use 100%. All of it is not 100% impact fee eligible by the state impact fee statute. And this is, I will apologize, there's a lot of numbers here, and it's only 2 slides, I promise. The first thing we're looking at is adding to our administration building that's on Celtice Way in between Coeur d'Alene and Post Falls, and adding on so that we can place a secure area within that building to allow a second location for paramedics to get medications and to restock ambulances. Right now, all of that takes place at Kootenai Health. It has worked great till now, but our call volume is at the point where that turnaround time works better if we have a second location to make that happen. So we have a $442,000 addition to the building to secure it and to allow both medications as well as supplies to be restocked at that location. And that would put an east-west split in where this equipment is available to the crews. And we're hoping to cut down the amount of time crews are running back and forth to places to restock and have them available in their response areas. We need an addition to our shop because really I need that addition right now. It's only 25% impact fee eligible. As I purchase new ambulances, the need for the increase in area within that shop goes up. So some of it is impact fee eligible. So 25% of that $1 million is impact fee eligible. We need to purchase in the next 10 years 5 additional ambulances. Since these are for new service, they are 100% impact fee eligible at $1.8 million. One of these has already been purchased because we need to have the service going now. And that service will go into the city of Coeur d'Alene at Coeur d'Alene Fire Station 4 starting March 1st. We're hoping to recap some impact fees to help us pay for that ambulance that we've already purchased because it's a year and a half to get an ambulance. So we really couldn't wait to do that process. We provide critical care services. So we transport the sickest of the sick patients between hospitals. There is a specialized ambulance that allows us to do that. In the next 10 years, we're going to need one of them because that call volume will increase to the point where we need an ambulance that is providing that service. That's about $450,000. I'm going to need a new response vehicle for my staff at $86,000. Believe it or not, we have to purchase a machine that generates oxygen. I know that sounds crazy, but in order to refill oxygen bottles that we use with patients, there's actually a machine that costs $100,000 that does that. We will need a second one to put on the west side of the county in the new expansion to allow that to take place. The equipment in that expansion, the drug dispensary equipment, or the way that, because these drugs are controlled, we have to have a specific tracking mechanism to allow us to not have someone standing there handing them out. So there are specific machines that allow us to do that, and that's about $300,000. We will need a new bariatric gurney, or a second bariatric gurney, I should say. Unfortunately, our patients are getting larger, and we're finding that we don't always have the bariatric gurney available. And a bariatric gurney, I'm sorry, is for someone who is above about 600 pounds, or their girth doesn't fit on our current gurneys. We will need a second one if the increase in people moving into Kootenai County plays out the way that we think it's going to, and we can look at those calls per the number of people and know where we need to be. We will need 3 more aeroclave decontamination systems. So we have a system that hooks into the ambulance, it pushes a button, and it decontaminates the back of the ambulance. This is out of COVID, and we use it on every ambulance after every patient. And obviously, as we increase the number of ambulances, we're going to have to increase the number of systems available. Some diagnostic equipment that we use, a new ventilator. Again, as CCTs or critical care transports increases, the need for additional ventilators comes in, because most of these patients who are transported, critical care, are transported on a ventilator between facilities. 3 new video laryngoscopes. This is equipment that allows us to control your airway and breathing when we need to in the field. And then a mini mass casualty trailer. As population increases, traffic accidents increase, the amount of vehicles involved in that traffic accident increases, ambulances can only carry so much equipment, so we actually have trailers that we can bring to the scene to provide additional equipment in those situations. Our total impact fee needs, if the population increases by the approximations are correct, it's about $4,350,683. If the population doesn't increase by the amount we've intended, we won't need as much equipment that's listed here, so that number will go down, and we will not purchase 5 ambulances if we don't need them. So the impact fees are directly related to the amount of people who move in, and what we need is directly related to the amount of people who move in. So it will move up and down as we go through the process. Again, this does not take into account all the equipment that is currently in service. That all needs to be replaced with my regular M&O budget. And as you know, because I know you deal with impact fees all the time, this does not account for staffing. Staffing has to come out of my regular M&O budget. It cannot come out of impact fees. So we are planning that increase we need through our budgeting process to allow us to staff everything that you see within the impact fee process. As I said, KCMSS does not have ordinance authority under Idaho law. That's why we have to come to the cities and the county to enact impact fees for us. Since this needs to be completed by the city council, they need to approve our CIP. That's why we're coming to you first, to get that what we're proposing meets what the city's needs are, and before we go to the city council and see if they're willing to adopt our impact fees. And I'm willing to answer any questions that you have.
This is a 10-year look ahead.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you see the actual funding of that monies? I know you've got demand immediately. How do you see that pacing out over that 10-year period? I'm sure it's front-loaded, but how much of it is front-loaded?
Right now, we see that with the ambulance that we're putting on in March, that buys us about a year till we'll have to put another one on. That ambulance is coming on part-time. We will increase that ambulance before we put another one on. But we have got this laid out in year increments of what we think we're going to need each year, and how the impact fees are coming in, or should come in, if the population estimates are correct. we're watching very closely whether or not those impact fees do come in that amount so that we can change that on the fly. That this is a very movable process and all of that. That's why we've made the commitment to every city, planning and zoning and city council that I've met with, that we will come back to you every year and give you an update on what we have done and how the plan has changed with the amount that we've collected that's come in, and whether or not we are on target for our goals or we are not on target for our goals, so that you know what your contributions are doing and how we're using that money to benefit the various subdivisions within the county.
Good answer. Thank you.
I got a question for staff or Sean. In this impact fee for Kate, that we're talking about today, we're also going to have our impact fees increase for building at some point in time. And is that also the same timeline that it has to go to city council in March?
No, this is on a separate track, so this doesn't need to delay ours or be wrapped into ours unless Randy has any other thoughts on that. But this is kind of separate. This can be a request, as Chief Keeley indicated. The request for you is to recommend adoption of their CIP to city council and collection of their impact fees. And then that would be something at the time of building permit, it would just be added on as an additional impact fee that would be clearly noted that that's for KCEMSS.
Okay, and then it's reviewed every year back to staff, or does it come back to us? Or how does that review work in case you don't have to use all this, or $4 million or whatever it was, impact
Yeah,
fee?
I'm not, we haven't had the specific
So
conversation.
the way it's set up with the rest of the cities is that the cities collect the fee for us. We reimburse them for their administrative charges to collect that fee. And then it becomes our problem. That we receive who the fee comes from, what it's for, and all of that. And the city, in the intergovernmental agreements at that point, the city is relieved of all of their responsibilities for the use of that. We have to account for it. We have to, if it would have to be returned at some point because we didn't use it, that won't happen. But if it did, that would be KCMSS's responsibility to deal with, as well as the interest attached to that. That would not be tied to the city. That is the way we have done the intergovernmental agreements with all the other cities in the county. We would come with an update every year. We would come back to both you and the city council with the update every year. That is what we're doing in other. This is all up to the way that the city of Coeur d'Alene wishes to structure it. And then at any time that we would need to increase the impact fee, we would go through the same process you're seeing today.
So
I
I
would come
take
to
it-
you and tell you why I'm doing what I'm doing and what I want to do and ask for your recommendation to the city council.
Okay, so I take it staff and your organization will work out the details on a yearly basis. Randy, you have something you want?
Yeah, we're going to have to look into the amendment of the ordinance, and we can include all of that in either the ordinance or the MOU. I do have a draft of the MOU, which is several months old, but, and it may need some revisions, but we can work out those details with staff.
Okay, great. Okay, questions? Peter? Go ahead.
How do you identify new users?
How do I identify my users?
How are the new users identified?
So what would happen is the new users would be identified through our patient care reports at where they're at. So if we normally run in a year 7,000 calls in the city of Coeur d'Alene, we can remove the same people, the person we're running on multiple times from that list, and then we would look at the next year at how many calls we had in the city of Coeur d'Alene, remove the multiple users, and see what the increase in call volume looks like.
Thank you. And the second, related to that, the impact fee is on new residents, right?
Correct.
How is that identified? How do you identify the new residents?
By new residential and new non-residential square footage. By the impact fee being placed on new residential units and new non-residential square footage.
So you get that data from the city? And that data is that's the same data you use the city uses for their impact fees?
Yeah, so when somebody pulls a building permit, if it's for growth, then the impact fee is assessed. Say if somebody had removed a house and are replacing it, that impact fee is not taken at that time. It's only for new growth
And
in the
everybody
future.
that gets to participate, the new impact fee, it's distributed to all the people that receive it in some fashion. Okay.
Correct, that's earmarked for wherever it goes.
Second, how is your level of service determined? Do you have a formula? Is there an industry standard?
So what was done when we initially started this process, we looked at what our response times were on average. And that is so our average response time throughout the county, from the time that you give the information to 911 till we have a unit on scene is 7 minutes and 59 seconds. The industry standard, EMS is difficult to have standards because it's done so different throughout the country, but it's about 8 minutes. You want the first unit on scene within about 8 minutes. Now, when you get into the core area, the city of Coeur d'Alene, the city of Post Falls, the city of Hayden, it's much quicker. When you get out to Spirit Lake and Timber Lake, but on average, it's 7 minutes and 59 seconds. Impact fees should allow us to keep that 7 minute and 59 second response time by adding units as growth occurs. And we watch that very closely to make sure we're meeting that. If we're not, then we need to look at increasing the amount of units that we have available to respond.
So in response time, is that the fire department's response time or your response time?
They are exactly the same.
That's well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Go ahead, Phil.
Thank you for the presentation, really very informative. A couple of questions. In your slide, you indicated $132 per residential unit, 7 cents per square foot on non-residential. Is that the actual rate that is charged each time a building permit is issued? Only on new building permits?
That is
How about
correct.
additions?
That is what we're asking, that the city of Coeur d'Alene collect $132 on any new residential structure that goes in and 7 cents a square foot on any new non-residential building.
So someone adding onto their building, they get a free ride, basically? To which
Yes.
I understand. I mean, you
Yes.
still have a
Yes.
special taxing district. You can get them that way, I guess, if need be.
Correct.
Yeah.
The theory is that adding onto a building doesn't create new calls for us.
Okay.
A new building creates new calls for us.
I understand. One final question. The money that is collected as whenever a Coeur d'Alene building permit is issued goes ultimately to you after administrative costs. Is all that money then spent within the city of Coeur d'Alene or can be countywide?
No, all the cities are paying into it, and it all goes countywide. I have to protect Kootenai County. So, for example, we've been collecting impact fees from the city of Rathdrum 4 or 5 months now. And the first thing they're being applied to is the new ambulance that's going into the city of Coeur d'Alene.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Other questions?
I mean, I guess as far as the city departments that would be affected, have they weighed in on the request, and does that seem like an adequate number?
I don't have an answer to that.
Yeah, the city departments haven't really, I mean, we're relying on their process for determining their fees, so it doesn't really affect the city's impact fees. We'll have our own impact fees. Theirs will just be a line item that's specific to KCEMSS.
Right, but I mean how most of the ambulances are housed in fire stations.
Oh, yeah, we've
Yeah,
been
so they-
very closely working with the fire department on this, absolutely.
Okay.
No, doesn't seem like any more questions. I appreciate it. Thank you. Very informative.
Thank you very much for your time, I greatly appreciate it.
Okay. We just need a simple recommendation, vote on this.
Correct.
So I'm looking for a simple motion for a favorable recommendation to City Council for the KCEMSS impact fee request as presented.
Well, I so move, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I have first,
Second.
second. Any other discussion? If not, is this a roll call, or should we just do a simple roll call?
Roll
Shannon?
call.
Roll call, please.
Fleming,
Yes.
Mandel,
Yes.
McCracken,
Yes.
Lutrip,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
Messina.
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the next is our public hearing, and just to give you a little update how this works, staff is going to present, and we're talking about our short-term rental amendment. So staff is going to give us a presentation, and then we'll open up to public testimony at that time, and there's a sheet back there if you haven't signed up. If you want to speak, that's great, just check the boxes. And I apologize for misrepresenting your name or saying it later on as I get it. But also, you'll have 3 minutes to speak to council. And at this time, I usually swear in everyone that wants to come up individually. We're going to do a group swear-in and make it a little easier on myself. So I'm not sure who wants to speak, but whoever wants to speak, please stand up, raise their hand, and I'll swear you in. Okay. Do you solemnly swear and/or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? Okay, great. And then when you do come up, just state your name and the city you live in, that's all. Okay, Renata, I'll give it to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we're doing a little divide and conquer on staffing, so I know you're used to having planning and zoning staff come and speak to you. I'm representing municipal services. We're the department that issues the permits, so we handle some of the day-to-day stuff in conjunction with planning. But I'm gonna go ahead and give the presentation today, and then you can ask all of us questions as
Okay,
needed.
great, thanks.
So as a reminder, Idaho Code does set some parameters for short-term rentals. So as a reminder, cities and counties and local governments can produce regulations for the welfare of neighborhoods to protect the residential nature of those neighborhoods. So that is something to keep in mind as we move forward. We started this process in 2017. The city of Coeur d'Alene brought on some regulations for short-term rentals. At that time, the staff report noted that it is the city's intent to have good neighbor policies and allow neighbors to be able to utilize their properties for short-term gain without undue interference. So that's true to today. We're trying to protect neighborhoods, but still allow some utilization of those residential properties by those neighbors. So actions today, we're asking you to take some public comments and consider some of the code amendments we're bringing forward. I'm going to kind of do a broad brush of where we're at, where we're going, but the action items before Planning Commission are really associated with those code amendments. I'm going to be bringing some other stuff forward to council that we'd like you to weigh in on, but you don't necessarily have authority to make action today on those items, and I'll move forward with some of that information shortly. As a little revisit, we have done some outreach. We've had about 13 media pieces since August of 2022. We've had 7 public meetings, including the one today, 4 of which that included a public comment opportunity. We've done outreach, updated our website, we presented to the Board of Realtors, and we've done several direct emails to those that actually have permits in the city and have provided us some public comments to let them know about these type of meetings. We've also received some written public comments. So since August, we've had about 163 written public comments. There may be some duplicates in there, but we've made an effort to go ahead and put them on the webpage so everybody has access to those and can read through them at their leisure. So some of the city stats, we have about 22,000 residential housing units in Coeur d'Alene. As of Thursday, we had 558 permits issued, but as of this morning, we have 564 permits issued. So as you can see, it's a moving number. We're getting quite a few bit in every week now, so we are certainly moving in our office. We've estimated some of the housing stock that's being used for short-term rental. It's based on 864 short-term rental units being estimated out there. And again, 564 of those are legally permitted. 5.5% of the housing stock in neighborhoods south of I-90 have the short-term rental permits. So you can see some of the blocks are feeling a large concentration. So we have some blocks that have 40 to 50% of short-term rentals on their block. And that's something as we get more of the information from Granicus that we're going to be able to better identify and to be able to bring back to our stakeholder meetings and to the Planning Commission, City Council in the future, some very specific information on the per block level of concentration. So this is something that was run in October of '22 to kind of show you where some of those units are and the huge concentration that we have south of I-90. You know, as soon as you get a little closer to the lake, those are some of the more desirable units. So definitely a little more concentration in those areas. And that's where we've heard some of the neighborhood concerns. And again, there's those housing unit issues where we're also looking at number of residential units available to our local workers and long-term rental needs. But as you can see, we presented this previously. I just wanted to kind of give you another revised review of some of those concentrated areas, and these are based on just permitted uses. This is a little chart that we received from Granicus recently, and it kind of goes through the advertising of short-term rental units and then the actual units that are out there. And you can kind of see our slow and steady growth and dips. During the winter months, we generally see a little decline. But the highlight of this summer from July till October, there were 883 individual units being advertised for short-term rental within the city limits of Coeur d'Alene. And again, those aren't all permitted units. So we still have about 319 units out there that are unpermitted. And again, here's the growth chart, just looking from 2017 forward. And again, we've had a pretty huge jump this year. I think that's because of some of the information that we've been putting out there, that we're getting pretty serious about making some code amendments and looking at some additional violation fees for those that are unpermitted. And I think this year, several came to the table knowing that they might have that opportunity for renewal or to be grandfathered in. So we saw pretty extreme growth this year. So as I was insinuating before, since August of '22, when we started doing some public presentations, we've received 166 more permits. And just since the January 20th press release, we've received an additional 45. So the internal ad hoc committee met. As you know, the mayor had appointed a couple council member representatives, a couple planning commission representatives, and staff to kind of sit down and kind of talk about how are we going to move this forward, what is our process going forward, and to review some of that information from Granicus. We had a little delay in getting that information from Granicus, and now we've found ourselves at a crossroad of a March 1st renewal date for all short-term rental permits. So as we discussed with the ad hoc committee, we had a desire to increase the fees to cover staff costs and the Granicus contract cost. We talked about a progressive violation for those that are not coming in and getting the permits. And we talked about what to do with that annual permit renewal. So at this time, we're really recommending we take a pause in any new applications after that February 21st council meeting, if council is agreeable to that, and setting a cap on based on the current number of permits on that date. So anybody that is currently permitted as of that date would be able to renew for the upcoming fiscal year under the current regulations. That gives us a time to sit down, have stakeholder meetings, work with staff, work with council and planning commission on what the codes should really look like in those concentrated areas. We're going to open that 24/7 hotline, so we'll be able to get a little more specific information on what are the neighborhood complaints, what are the concerns, is it parking, is it noise, is it garbage? We could have a little more statistical information at that time. So again, right now we're looking at 564 permits. Our previous renewal fee was $96 a year. We're requesting that be set at $180 per year. And again, that's something that's going to be going forward to council, so it's not for your consideration this afternoon, but we wanted you to kind of see the full picture here. And again, that fee includes just not only the Granicus contract cost, but staff time. It's going to include the 24/7 hotline and then the monitoring throughout the full year. We're not the only city that's struggling with this. There's lots of cities out there that are trying to figure out what is the best method to protect their neighborhoods and allow that limited use of short-term rental in those vacation or in the residential neighborhoods. You can see we have Colorado, we have Georgia, Palm Springs, a little town outside of Yellowstone Park. They're all looking at the same thing. But Santa Cruz did do a little moratorium. It took them about 8 months to work through their code and come out with a new code. And they did cap some of the areas that were highly congested and open up new permits in those areas that were not congested or overly concentrated. So that's something we're looking at that we can hope we can work through and figure out what is the right mix for Coeur d'Alene. So right now, what we're recommending of you is the code amendment. And the code amendment is specific to removing that 14-day exemption. Felt like it's really just a complicated matter to try and monitor and keep track of. We don't know what the 14-day period is. It just makes more sense to move all of those into a short-term rental status. We're asking you to also amend section 17.08, 1050, which would allow additional penalties for the non-permitted units. And again, those penalties are going to be set by resolution of the council. So we'd love for you to weigh in on it, but today is just specific to the code amendment. The resolution for those fees will be forwarded to council on the 21st. So at this point in time, we had lots of conversation around the table. We know other cities like Hawaii, Maui, they're going up to $10,000 in violation fees. Well, that's a bit extreme for Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, but we really needed to have a little bit more of a little oomph in our penalties. Right now, we have a $100 fee available to us in our code. So we are recommending that a first violation would be $1,000, a second $2,000, and the third up to $5,000. And those really are for those companies or those individuals that are refusing to come into compliance or refusing to cease and desist after they receive a cease and desist letter. So we always really try and work with the person, give them the notice, and give them an opportunity to correct before those fees are elevated. But it does give us a tool at the staffing level to allow us to make a change with violation. So the next step is really going to be that February 21st City Council meeting in which they're going to be having a public hearing regarding the fees and then a hearing to consider these code amendments. And again, they'll accept public comments at that time. So the action for you tonight is what we're requesting, or this afternoon, sorry. I've moved us into evening due to the darkness outside, is removal of that section regarding the 14 days and to clarify the penalty section to be set by resolution. And then we would love for you to express support of the ad hoc committee's recommendation for a cap or pause in issuing the new short-term rentals, and then to allow renewals for the next permit year based on those that are currently legally permitted as of February 21st. And I and staff stand for questions.
Questions?
I have a question.
Before, I forgot to ask also, does any of the commissions have a conflict of interest on this? No? Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, Sarah.
Okay. I have a question on some of the public comment that I read was talking about people in the last week, month or so coming in and trying to get a permit and then hearing that it was capped. So can you explain just for everybody
Sure.
how that is working right now?
Sure. So as of right now, new permits are still being accepted. We have not closed the door on that. We have shut the portal for the renewals until after the February 21st council meeting so we can get direction from council on how they'd like to handle those renewals. So once the council provides direction, we can turn that on the next day and people that are legally permitted will be able to hit renew.
So for a new permit today,
Yeah.
that's not available online anyway. They would still have to come in person,
No, they should be able to apply for a new permit online.
online as well. Okay.
So it's
The
just the
21st.
renewals that are shut off?
Right.
But once council approves what we might recommend, or whatever council's going to do, the people who had permits last year or this year, they can renew again once the portal opens up. So we're not, I read some of the comments and they're thinking like, we're not having any more permits, and that's not the case whatsoever.
Right. I think the confusion lies in that we are gonna make the recommendation to pause new permits after the February 21st. Because the renewal date is March 1st, with an expiration date of March 30th. It gives staff 30 days to process permits, but they're due on March 1st. So we are just needing a little pause on new permits for the year because we already are seeing concentrated areas have more and more permits come into those areas. So we're trying to do a little pause on that, but those that are already existing, we're allowing to continue for one more year because we know they have those bookings. We are trying to be fair to say, let's work together for another 6 months or so. Hopefully, we won't need a full year to get new codes in place and then be able to open up in those areas that aren't already concentrated.
Okay, and then any changes that come, once we get all the information, whatever those changes might be, will be implemented once city council approves those changes down the road. And those would apply to existing permits or just new permits
Just new permits.
for the following year?
So if in case we were able to come up with new codes and ordinances in 6 months,
Right.
we would adopt those new codes and ordinances, then allow new entry in. So they would be under the new code.
Okay.
The renewal folks are gonna be under the existing code
Until they renew?
until they renew for 2024.
Okay. Okay.
But the changes that, potential changes in, say, October would have a similar public process.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, we're hoping to be able to have more stakeholder meetings once we get the Granicus data and be able to come out with some very specific information and to be able to show to people, here's where we're having concerns of the integrity of neighborhoods and what we are hoping to protect for those neighborhoods.
Phil, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you again. Let me ask you, we have a record of 558 permits and some others that we believe may be out there. When we get a permit, is the city itself maintaining a specific location of where these are, or just a generalization that in this area there are so many?
No, we actually have it GIS'd, so the
That's-
map
thank
that
you.
you'll see will be very specific with known data.
Thank you.
So let me understand. So people can continue to apply for a permit up until the 1st of March? When?
February 21st,
A week from today?
unless council decides
Well,
they
I
don't want
understand.
to cap.
Okay. So this is really a test of the communication system, both the press and the people here and whatnot, because one would think that if you're aware of this and you want to have one, you would, come in real quick like over the internet to you all and make up the whatever, however many might be missing. Secondly, this is an aside, I see this as a business. I just got and maybe others, if you get a little note in your mail, you can, you want to sell or rent, well, there's another alternative. I mean, this is the business. And I think it's somewhat national, maybe international. And I'm very heartened to see other cities up on the board that you've talked to. Because I have a few friends that come here for vacation, they love it here. They go other places and they then let me know what's good and bad about this place. And one of the things is the short-term rental is really good here because it's really, whatever it is. And to hire that firm to help you, you all to be complimented. This is a good way to do it. It may take some time, may take a lot of public testimony, but we started this off as I think it was a soft touch. I think that was the word we used, or John, a light touch. And now, and we anticipated had to make some changes as we got to know more about it. And now's the time. So thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question about the 14-day exemption. I understand if they're like 14 days throughout the year, they're really hard to track. Would it be reasonable to have a 14-day, like 14 consecutive day window where somebody could apply for maybe, if you called it a temporary permit or a 14-day permit? Mostly for events like Ironman. I know for years, even before short-term rentals were a thing, people were renting out their houses and they had a list at the chamber of who was renting houses to Ironman. And I think there are people in that bucket that maybe don't operate as a short-term rental business, but if you don't have every short-term rental captured in some way, then you're gonna get somebody like my neighbors renting Ironman Week. they're gonna report them. And it might just be easier to have everybody in the system, and then Granicus can watch them and make sure they only did the 14 days. But would that be a reasonable expectation? I mean, or a
Could-
possibility?
It could certainly be something we add to the mix when we do that next iteration of code development. I think at this point, we're just trying to make it very simplistic for this next phase of tracking the renewals. What's happening is we're seeing through Granicus the advertisements that are going out. So they may do 14 days during Ironman and then do another 10 days at Christmas and then another 10 days here. And so throughout the year, it ends up being more than that 14-day period.
Yeah.
And so it's just going to be framing it right, figuring out what's the right reporting mechanism to Granicus that we could actually capture it.
Yeah, I mean, I would
But I
think
don't
like
think that's off the table at all.
a consecutive window of stated dates with the application. I mean, there's a rule in the IRS code that's like the Augusta rule that exempts people from renting the income. They don't have to report the income of renting their home for 14 days or less. I think there are people that do that, but I also see value in probably getting them in the system somehow, because then you could watch for another, you only had these 14 days, and then they would be subject to the increased fines and penalties for that, if that were to happen, so.
Yeah.
Okay, other questions? Not, okay. So you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Please watch the clock. When it gets close to the 3 minutes, kind of wrap it up for us. We'd appreciate
We're
it.
talking about tonight, maybe.
Thank you.
So the first person I have is Eric Smith and did not wish to testify. David Wallace, and you do wish to testify, David? Come on up. Just state your name and the city you live in, and you have 3 minutes.
My name is David Wallace. I live in Coeur d'Alene. I live on the northern side of town, so
Okay.
north of 90. And I appreciate you giving us a chance to speak to you all today. In my opinion, this proposed amendment is a solution looking for a problem. Einstein said if he had only 1 hour to solve a problem, he would spend 55 minutes looking at the problem itself and 5 minutes looking at solutions. What we saw today was 55 minutes, not exactly, but of solutions, and the only evidence that there's a problem is that short-term rentals exist. That's it. I'd also like to speak to the fact that we did our own research, pulling city data and police data, and we found that only 1% of noise and nuisance complaints to the police department were due to short-term rentals, and there were individual apartment complexes that had 3 times that number. So it's not causing any high number of calls for service. Mostly what we have, in my experience, is families that come to hang out together. They go out to eat, may go to Silverwood, go to the lake, and they love playing board games. I get a lot of people saying they love hanging out, playing board games, and watching movies. And that's not causing any degradation of neighborhood integrity, in my opinion. A couple weeks ago, I went into the website first to renew my permit, and I saw that the button had been deleted. I checked a few days before, and then it was removed. So I went down to the planning department to renew my permit because we only have until March 1st. And when I went there, I talked to a couple individuals, some of whom are sitting here today, and I was told that they're not allowing any more renewals because the city council might change the fee. The law today is the law today, and if I'm here to renew a permit, and the law says I'm able to renew my permit today at whatever the fee is, as Americans, I've never been treated that way before under any city government, state government, federal government, where an executive branch or a department or an agency makes a decision that they're just going to withhold doing their job for you because they think the legislature or the city might make a decision in the future that would change how much I owe them. So they're withholding they actually said to some members of that own other STRs that they're holding the checks, they're not depositing them because the fee's going to go up. How do they know? They just made that decision. So they've become the entire source of all authority in the city if they're just making that decision on their own. And I don't appreciate it. I don't think it's the right way to run a government or a department.
Before you sit down, I usually don't get into a discussion at this point, but given the fact of what you said, I'd like, if I could, an explanation, or not at this point. Randy? No? Okay. Go ahead. Thank you. Do you have anything else to say?
Well, that's it. That's the
Okay.
main point. Thank
We
you.
appreciate it. Thank you. Next is Virginia Coe, and you did not want to speak. And I can't,
Brent Bolton, maybe? Brent, double Bs, two Bs.
did not wish to speak, no. Carlos Martinez, and you did not wish to speak. Sherry Berkemeyer, and you did. Name and city, that's all.
Sherry Berkheimer.
Okay. And you live in City of
My
Coeur d'Alene?
home- Pardon?
And what city do you live in?
I live in Ponderay.
Okay,
My home is in Vintage Court in Coeur d'Alene.
okay.
I was one of the first people to get a permit in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
I've successfully supplemented my income with my rental, my short-term rental. I've not had any problems, no complaints from the neighbors. I did exactly what I was told to do initially, let all my neighbors know by a letter. I think my concern today is, well, I have a lot, but only to address the concern I have today. I feel like the amount that I'm paying for a permit has been doubled because of the problems that have been created from the influx of short-term rentals. I don't feel like I should have to be penalized for Genesis or whatever the company is coming in to do the survey. That's not my problem. That's the city of Coeur d'Alene's issue. But I'm paying double. What's to permit the city from charging me triple or quadruple in the future years? I would like to add that I am in agreement with the penalties. I think the problem has come from a lot of people that don't even live here buying a property, and that's a separate issue. But my issue is I don't feel like I should be penalized for their issues.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank
Tom.
you. Appreciate it. Stacy Armstrong, and you did wish to testify?
Hi,
Hi, Stacy. Name and city.
my name is Stacy Armstrong. I live in Dalton Gardens, but I run a short-term rental property management company in Coeur d'Alene.
Okay.
So I'm also part of the Coeur d'Alene Vacation Rental Alliance as a board member. The Granicus data, which the planning department has decided the law-abiding STR permitted owner should pay for, is unfair. In fact, the city council members rejected a fee increase in December based on it being capricious that we would have to pay for this data to be gathered. We were shocked and appalled, and we reject this. The city council has already said that this is unfair, and yet they're still bringing it in front of the city council. We're pretty surprised by that decision. We understand that companies like Granicus are needed. They are able to do the deep dive. They are really able to gather a lot of data. But they also market to small towns, selling fear and ripping off municipalities by offering to do the dirty work of code enforcement. Who knows better for our own town? A large corporation selling fear and increasing big brother antics? Hiring Granicus was off-brand for Idaho. Compliance services should be done at the local level. We have a parking committee that works really well. We've met with council people before as board members who have other ideas on ways that we can help more STR owners come into compliance. You can see the numbers have nearly doubled just by this information of people needing permits. I urge you to reconsider the short-term rental fee increase. I urge the planning department to not take it in front of the city council. They've already rejected it in December, and for them to bring it up again is against what they have asked for in December. As a property manager of short-term rentals. I work really closely with the planning department in order to make sure that every single one of our short-term rentals in Coeur d'Alene is permitted. And I can say, without a doubt, Sean Holm and Kelly Sutters work really hard. They are incredibly kind and professional and have always been really, really easy to work with. So I did want to say something really great about Sean and Kelly. They've given us, when we've asked for FOIAs, they've delivered us the information right away. And we understand that this is a national conversation. We just really hope that all of us are included as stakeholders on the ground level of conversations and not just the public hearings, because we really do have a great idea of what's going on in the town. We know a lot of the owners. Most of them are, or we're in conversation all the time. We are trying to be good neighbors. And like the lady that said before, there's been a lot of short-term owners in compliance for years.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, ma'am, ma'am,
Stacy?
Stacy,
I guess.
okay.
Sorry.
So you're property management?
Yes, sir.
Just a local firm?
Yes.
Okay, and do you have an association you belong to, local or state or national?
Yes, sir.
And they deal with short-term rentals?
Yes, sir.
So you have some understanding what other jurisdictions are doing?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So I belong to our local organization, Coeur d'Alene Vacation Rental Alliance. I'm a board member. The founders are here, Melissa and Jeremy Radford, and Melissa is our president. I also belong to Vacation Rental Management Association. We have an entire code compliance department, and that also works really closely with a national organization called Rent Responsibly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stacy.
Was there any other questions? No. Okay, thank you.
Laura Williams, did wish to speak?
Good afternoon. I'm Laura Williams, and I'm from Coeur d'Alene.
Right.
I want to bring to the planning departments, the planning commissions, and next week the city council a part of short-term rentals that I don't think is being considered very well, and that is for short-term rentals, in-home renting of rooms. So I'm an Airbnb host, and I live a couple of blocks up this way, and I rent a room and a bathroom and a small part of my house as a short-term rental during the summer. I've been a permit holder since the institution of the permit program in 2017. And I feel that the increase in fees, well, I feel first of all that the fee schedule really is inequitable to short-term rental, in-home short-term rentals with owners and who rent out of their home and live there at the same time. And some of the problems that we see with short-term rentals with absent owners really don't occur with in-home owners. The fees are really inequitable because short-term in-home rentals are usually half, 3 times, sometimes 4 times smaller. So I rent my room, bathroom area for $60 to $90, kind of depending on the season. That's cheaper than even Motel 6 in our area because I've looked at the market research. And so those increase in fees are really a large percentage to a small little operation like mine, where really I'm a homeowner, live and work here in Coeur d'Alene, and I'm just subsidizing my income, which is mostly going back into, my property, keeping my property up, keeping up with the property taxes and things like that. So it's a little bit similar to the 14-day type, but instead I usually run that over just over the summer, really because the in-home short-term rentals, renting out a room, does not have a huge market in the wintertime. That's mostly the full home rentals. So I think we really need to bring back into the conversation that there are different categories, and these fees and these rules really affect us much differently. And the short-term in-home rental operator, like myself, we really bring a whole different customer. I bring families and friends for neighbors. I've had many guests who have come here to visit elderly parents in assisted living or hospice. I've even had them come here to organize funerals and take care of their parents' effects to stay with me, and they couldn't afford to stay in other places. We have people who come in who are just middle-income people like myself who couldn't afford to stay in some of the more expensive places we have. So it really, the short-term in-home rental category really also contributes to our economy, as well as helps people who stay and live here in this neighborhood maintain and keep up their property and keep their home. So that's really all I have to say in terms of the actions today. I would not recommend that we recommend an increase in the permit fees, at least not the blanket increase.
Okay, go ahead, Peter, you have a question?
Maybe out of place here in thinking, but, so your concern is the fee as a percentage of your, would you be agreeable to pay a percentage of your income as opposed to a fee?
I think I would be agreeable to looking at some way to stagger it. It could be by size of rental, it could be by, size of rental space, or maybe income. But I think that, like the other woman just talked about, I think kind of getting stakeholders in the different categories together is really important before we go further with more regulations.
Now, I think the city's intent is to run this as like we call it enterprise, I'll call it an enterprise fund, where all the expenses are paid for by all the revenue received by the operation, and the revenue is determined on the level of service provided. So there's a balance there. So the more effort the city has to put into this, or jurisdiction has to put into it over time, probably the higher the fees. So.
But it's not equitable for a whole home that's being rented out versus a room in a home. That's my point.
I don't know what the equity would be. I don't know how that be determined, and that people smarter than me, like yourself, but
Yeah.
I'm just thinking that there's a couple other ways it could
Okay,
work.
Peter,
And secondly, that.
We're not kind of in a discussion
Yeah,
point
you know-
yet.
Good,
Yeah,
okay,
kind of,
okay.
yeah.
Can
Well,
we
I think
just
the
focus-
enterprise is pretty important.
Can we, yeah, it'd
Yeah,
be great.
yeah.
And that,
I
what you
appreciate
just
it. All right.
said belongs.
Let me continue with the meeting, and I
Well,
appreciate your time.
Thank
All
you.
right,
It was
next-
well
The
stated.
next person I have is Scott Crawford, and you did not wish to speak. Thank you. Heather Crawford, I'm sorry, did not indicate whether you wanted to speak or not. Okay. Matt Upper, and you did wish to speak? Matt?
Clapper, that's my name. Matt Clapper.
I'm sorry.
Clapper, yeah, I live in
Okay.
Coeur d'Alene. I work for a vacation rental management company called Vacation Rental Authority, and I have for the last 2 years. Before that, I worked for Vacasa in the city of Coeur d'Alene for 7 years as a operations manager. So I've been deeply involved in Coeur d'Alene vacation rentals for a long time in the management perspective. Seen a lot of growth. There's one thing that I keep seeing is a mention of residential integrity, neighborhood integrity. I think that's a definitive that's personal to each person who might be understanding what residential integrity actually means, or is something we've established a definition for, as far as was someone uncomfortable with having X amount of vacation rentals on their block, or is there a definitive design for what is the ideal definitive residential integrity? Is it because I don't think we can necessarily control the integrity of neighborhoods by limiting the number of vacation rentals allowed on it. The real estate market in this town went crazy over the last year, and everything got skyrocketed in price. So basically the guy, average person trying to rent a home within the popular regions where vacation rentals are isn't necessarily going to happen on the local incomes. The prices of the homes, there's a certain category of buyer that may have been able to purchase said homes, and now they are residents of that neighborhood, and they're making decisions on their home that they bought to create whatever environment they choose for it, and they are now members of the neighborhood, so they are part of the residential and the neighborhood integrity. I think that it's kind of a lot of fear involved in having certain areas that are popular and have been, carried on throughout the, traditional sense of Coeur d'Alene, in having this feel and having this, this neighborhood thing. We've pretty much lost control of that, I think. And it seems like it might be trying to reestablish some kind of control. I don't neglect that there are definitive needs for regulations, which we currently have, and I'm all for, and every home I've managed in the city of Coeur d'Alene has a permit or is in process. And we're more than willing to comply with existing or future regulations as they come up, because we can't necessarily control that. We can have a voice in it, we can state an opinion about it, we can vote for it. I'm also a member of the Coeur d'Alene Vacation Rental Alliance, and I think that as a community of owners, they should have a more direct impact on the overall procedure involved in controlling and regulating said things, because they actually have an active interest in preserving some of that neighborhood integrity and actually having, especially when it comes to the who's going to take the call when someone calls and says, my neighbor's doing something wrong. That should be a local thing, but that's just my opinion, so thanks.
Thank you, appreciate it. Melissa Radford, if you did wish to speak.
I'm Melissa Radford, and I live here in Coeur d'Alene. Just planning commissioners, we really thank you for your time and for hearing our comments today. My husband and I founded the Coeur d'Alene Vacation Rental Alliance, and are really proud of what we've accomplished here in town, just as far as education and just collecting people who really truly want to protect this town and run short-term rentals. So the testimony by the Planning Department at the September 12th, 2022 General Services Public Works meeting stated that they had received data from host compliance, which showed there was around a 65% non-compliance rate for short-term rentals in Coeur d'Alene. This was unsolicited and free data given by the host compliance in 2021 in order to entice the city to purchase their services. This was simply a sales pitch to the city, and the company had no incentive to prove or confirm their data. And as you can see from that graph, it's nowhere near 65%, even back in 2021 and whatever, kind of as far back as they went, it was never near 65% non-compliance. So the reliability and accuracy of the data that they've put forth multiple times is uncertain. It was presented to City Council as proof of a significant problem of noncompliance and extrapolated to guess at how many unpermitted properties existed in 2022, which was completely unreliable data. Do we have 100% assurance from Granicus that their data is accurate, and what will the city do with the information once it's been obtained? If they're, wanting these higher fees, how are they going to go from we have this information to Granicus to implementing these fees? Like, what's that process look like? Also, you and we both deserve to know how many complaints have been made to the city, the content of those complaints, whether the complaint was regarding a permitted versus non-permitted STR, a long-term rental, or an owner-occupied property, and if the city did anything about it. They have not done any of those fines since the inception of this. That $100 fine that they said is all they have at their disposal, they've never done. They've never fined anybody. The perceived and actual concerns with the impact of STR should be based on facts and data, not anecdotes or extrapolation, and take into account all the positives that STRs bring to Coeur d'Alene and the enforcement tools that already exist. There's never been any presentation on the positives that we bring to business, to allowing families to come, to just taking really good care of our properties and that kind of thing. So we believe that the City Council should not vote on these proposals until reliable data is presented and evaluated. So if the Granicus data is coming, fine, let's deal with it then, but we don't need to push something through just because we have a timeline coming up. We need to be really smart. When they need to appropriately enforce the current ordinance so that neighbors feel heard and responsible short-term rental owners can continue hosting with reasonable requirements and without the fear and uncertainty that this ever has created. This is our future. We've invested everything, and that that this has been just full of fear for us and just, I think, the whole community. We just need our entire community to really know the whole story and to be able to benefit from welcoming guests to our tourism-reliant city. Thank you.
Okay,
Before you step down,
Yeah.
today we're really just looking at those 3 points.
Mm-hmm.
Are any of those problematic for you? Because that's what we need to focus on. We've heard a lot of this, and I'm so grateful for this. But this is what we're looking at today. We are not re-legislating what's going on. I really need to know, do you mind the 14-day stays on or off? Do you care if there's penalties of this magnitude? And do you support the ad hoc committee's recommendation for cap on short-term rentals? That's what we're looking at today, because we know this is a big issue.
Yes.
But this is not where we're legislating it today. That's what we're looking at today. So
absolutely.
can you address those really
Yes.
quickly, since you're in this
Our
game?
stance is that the 14-day exemption, it doesn't necessarily make sense. You can't track it. So yes, I'm for that. The fees, higher fees, yes. The short-term rental owners that are out of compliance, that are causing any trouble for their neighbors, we want that taken care of too. We are good neighbors and we want to be good neighbors. We want the bad actors taken care of because they reflect poorly on us. So we're, fine with that. But how is that going to happen? We need to see that they're going to actually follow through. The last one, no, and my husband's going to talk about it because of the moratorium situation, just because it's not called a moratorium, it is a moratorium. And there's some, Idaho State has some legal things to say about that, so he'll talk about that a little bit more, but
Thank you.
yeah.
Let's stay on point.
Thank you.
We all need to get through today. Stay on
Jer-
point. Thanks. Sorry,
Okay.
don't have all day.
Jeremy Radford.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeremy Radford. I live in Coeur d'Alene. Thank you, commissioners. As you as you heard, we're pretty emotional about this. Everyone has stakes in this. We're all stakeholders. So we appreciate being able to be heard, at least by someone. Planning commissioners, I'm just going to read to you a state law 6523 regarding emergency ordinances and moratoriums. If the governing board finds that an imminent peril to the public health, safety, or welfare requires adoption of ordinances as required or authorized under this chapter, or adoption of the moratorium upon the issuance of selected classes of permits, or both, it shall, in writing, in its reasoning for that finding. A moratorium, for definition, is a waiting period set by an authority or a suspension of an activity. Imminent peril, the definition of that, the state or condition of being likely to occur at any moment, near at hand, rather than distant or remote. The threat must be immediate or imminent. The city must provide the public with written explanation for the proposed new permit moratorium as required by statute 67-6523. We also require the same written rationale for the moratorium from January 20th through the February 21st on permit renewals during the renewal period that exist in the current ordinance, due prior to March each year. The renewal portal has been removed from the city's website on or around January 23rd, 2023. The only reason that has been shared that there might be a fee increase for the renewals. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Lisa Zangora, and you didn't indicate whether you wanted to speak or not? Okay.
It might be me.
What? Oh, you coming up? Okay, great.
I am Lisa Zaragoza.
Oh,
I
close. Sorry.
I live in Coeur d'Alene, and I am part of the Coeur d'Alene Vacation Rental Alliance. I'm a board member. So I have a invested interest in this community. Purchased a short-term rental a little bit over a year ago, and I wish I would have brought a picture of my short-term rental and my neighbor's long-term rental next to me, so you all could see that we care about neighborhood integrity. There are so many long-term rental owners that are not being targeted, that do not upkeep their property. It's a mess. My rental is immaculate. I talk to my guests about where to park, about noise, things like that. And so, yes, we're passionate about what we do, but we're also passionate about what the planning department is proposing. I feel like since I moved to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, I kind of felt like I moved here and I wasn't going to have this stronghold type of local government. And with this whole short-term rental ordinance that is being proposed, first of all, the ordinance in place is not being, somebody's not doing their work. And so now they're, imposing these other regulations that they want to put on us, and I kind of feel like you guys have me like right here. I feel that the Planning Commission is very biased. There has not been one thing positive said about the short-term rental community since I've been coming to these meetings. So I don't know where that's coming from. It's very disappointing as a resident here in the community because we provide a lot of positive things to this community. Do I agree with the 14-day exemption for permits? Don't really, I don't know how you're going to monitor that. As far as violations, I'm not going to say yay or nay to the amount, that I think is appropriate for violations. I'm currently permitted. Absolutely do not agree with putting a hold on new permits because there could be people currently right now in the process of purchasing houses with the intent to, short-term rental their house, and now you're telling them that what they can and can't do with their own property. Idaho state law states that it's there to preserve our personal property rights. And so for the city and the planning department to now come in and pull that away from us, then now they're telling us what we can and can't do. And there's a reason why we have state codes and we have state law. City attorney stated that in order to make any change to put a moratorium in place, that there would have to be an emergency declaration. There's been no emergency declaration. And where is the data and the facts to show that short-term rentals are a problem? They have shown us nothing. We're 1% of the problem, and we had to go find that data ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Josh Moore, sorry if I did not pronounce your last name right. You did wish to speak?
Sir?
Josh?
Sorry.
Sir?
Yeah.
Okay.
My writing.
No problem. Hi, Josh. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Commissioners. Josh Sir, Hayden, Idaho. I was born and raised in North Idaho, and I serve on the Government Affairs Committee for the Association of Realtors and also on the Legislative Committee at the Idaho Realtors level in Boise. And I worked with Hillary and Sean on this permit process in 2017. So I try to keep my finger on the pulse of this issue across the state, and I'm invested in it locally. We've had conversations with our association members, our council at the state level, and it is everyone's strong opinion that instituting a regulation like what we're proposing, moratorium, cap, freeze, whatever we want to call it, is an absolute infringement on property rights, and it's a violation of the state law. And I understand, and I'm sympathetic to staff's position on this because they're trying to do the right thing. They have complaints from the community that they're addressing. This is not the way to do it. We can't put a policy in place that takes people's private property rights away and picks winners and losers, and effectively that's what this does. And there are a few common misconceptions, I think, that short-term rentals have gotten thrown under the bus over the last few years. I think one is that the parking noise complaints are specific to those, and those are issues I can tell you as a real estate professional that are growth related more than they're short-term rental related. And I think we have all the procedures in place to deal with those. The other misconception is that eliminating short-term rentals is going to somehow create an affordability solution, which I think everybody's in agreement that's not going to happen. We're not going to see $300,000 homes on Bancroft anytime in the future. So I would respectfully request that, like has been brought up, the first 2 points are non-issues for us. The moratorium is something we respectfully request that you not consider. So, and hopefully we can have stakeholder involvement in the future and actually get the data from Granicus so we can all work together in good faith to try to improve our permit process and make a solution for everyone. So, thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Josh Katz, did wish to speak? No. You did not? Okay. Darren and Jennifer Miller, they just said maybe, didn't know. Sure. Darren.
Darren Miller, born and raised here, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
Right. Thank you.
I think Daryl Huff wrote the book, How to Lie with Statistics. So it's pretty easy to manipulate data, whichever side that you're on. You know, I know we're here to look at these 2 points, but also give feedback on the 3 minutes of what this could potentially do. Obviously, I live down here at 1005 Pine Avenue. We have property, we have over half a dozen properties here in town, in this direct, area. So, like Lisa said, I don't think there's any emphasis right now on what the positives bring to this. We are a tourist town, we always have been. For me, growing up with the mills here and all the logs on the river, I don't think anybody agrees that they would like to see that again. So, but as far as, why change an ordinance that's not being complied to currently, what would new ordinances do? If they're not compliant, they're not compliant. So you can come up with as many new rules as you want, but let's focus on the issue, which is compliance. And now that we have been bringing that up, over 500 now are permitted, correct, out of close to 1,000. So, but I would like to see where that data is coming from as well. But I think, I'm a member of the VRBO Alliance, and I think based on the fees that's coming in, that's $180,000 that the city's bringing in that can focus on the compliance of the ones that are ruining it for all those that are trying to be within the compliance. Does that make sense? So, and I'm not opposed to the 14-day or the penalties, but I am opposed to a moratorium for sure. So.
Thank you. Katie, and I can't make out Earth, and I'm sorry.
Hi,
Hi. Just state name and city you live in, that's all.
Katie Riot, Coeur d'Alene.
Okay, great.
I want to tell you a story about a girl named Katie. In 2009, she moved to Coeur d'Alene. She loves this is where she gets to call home because of the beauty that surrounds, the people, and how close everything is within a 5-mile radius. At 29 years old, she was able to purchase an REO property and make a dream of homeownership a reality. This home was intended to be an investment property. She has lived in this HOA for the last 13 years and has maintained being president for this length. After living in the home for almost 9 years, a life change occurred and she found herself being bi-state, going between Idaho and Washington frequently. This meant that although her belongings were in the home, it was vacant for a majority of the time. She decided to find a tenant. This tenant would have to be okay with her needing to stay a night here and there or to access things when she was back in town. It made sense to turn it into an STR, however, the CCRs clearly stated no rentals for less than 30 days. Given the determined and persistent type she is, she went to work to change the CCRs. After 2 years in getting the other homeowners on board, the CCRs were amended and STRs were approved. Katie is 42, single, and has no children. She has paved a career in real estate and also owns 2 other businesses. She has no 401k, and her retirement plan is real estate. She is intelligent with a 4-year degree from the University of Washington and has overcome many hurdles, including health, to be where she is today. After 12 years, she was able to purchase a second home next door. This took 4 months of her own sweat equity remodeling because the previous occupants had kept it in less than acceptable standards. After spending all of her savings and using the HELOC that she had, the home had to be furnished, and the only way to recoup the cost was by allowing STRs. Over the years, she has been able to help those that needed a place to stay for 1 to 4 months at a time, whether a traveling professional, someone in the completion stages of their home being built, or families coming to explore and enjoy activities while boosting the local businesses. She also has had long-term tenants and ended up in court and won because of the damages done. Owning 2 homes is not easy. Running 2 STRs is not easy, and a full-time job, but she does it, at times barely scraping by because she knows that one day it will pay off as she works towards retirement and plans to leave a legacy to her unborn children and nephews. Katie abides by the laws and has never had a complaint because she vets every single person that comes into her homes and is hands-on with constant communication. You see, Katie has attained and done all of this with no help and no one to lean on, but cannot continue to do it alone without the help of good tenants and those coming to enjoy the area as STRs. A day, a 24-hour period is all that separates the two. 2 questions I have for you, the commission members. Have you ever purchased, inherited, or invested in real estate? And have you at any point in your lifetime ever stayed in an STR? I, Katie, stand here before you today to beg and plead that you understand the severity of your decision and fight to end STRs and/or create outrageous fines. This would be a detriment to all, negligent on your part, and will impact the future not only of myself, but also that of the city and vicinity, given what is constitutionally allowed. Thank you.
Thank you. Holly Hanson? Maybe?
Hi,
Hi, Holly. Just name and city, please.
I'm Holly, and I'm in Coeur d'Alene.
Great.
Fourth generation Idahoan, raising my son here. A member of the Alliance and a realtor in Coeur d'Alene now for 11 years, and I do represent a lot of people who are generational living here and people out of town who have purchased short-term rentals and helping them get started with that. And a lot of what's been said, I agree with. As far as these go, the first one, I actually know a couple of people that leave for like 2 or 3 weeks out of the summer. They go stay with their parents or whatever, because during those couple of weeks, they can make enough money to allow them to live in the home that they purchased in the downtown area. So I don't, like, whatever, there's just a couple of them I know. The second one, by all means, find those that are not following the rules. I don't see why not, but don't penalize those of us that have. Because when I help somebody buy a home, I suggest to them all the things that need to be done in order to make it a beautiful contributing part of the neighborhood. And I also say, make sure you're legal in every way you need to be. So if somebody doesn't want to be legal, then that's on them and they can get a fine. As far as the last one, don't do that, please. And I think I would like to help you see a different perspective. Let's fly up into the air a mile and look down. Downtown Coeur d'Alene, when I was a kid growing up here, like the Garden District, you'd walk through and there would be some pretty sketchy places, especially when you're thinking like East Sherman, right? Look at it now. It's beautiful. Why did it get to be that way? Because people, whether they're out of state or they live here or they finally had enough money to buy their dream home downtown, dumped all this money into a home, and they need that income from the short-term rental, at least part of the year, maybe even all the year, to afford what they've done to that home. If you put a moratorium on this, if you cut out and say that we can only have so many vacation homes per block, the people who have already purchased those houses, let's talk about the ones that have already been owned, what's going to happen to them? Well, they already own a home, like 5 acres in Athol, let's say, or maybe they live in Montana. What's going to happen to those? They're going to become long-term rentals. Oh my Lord, there are no rules on long-term rentals. Oh my gosh, how have you ever driven through a neighborhood, there's not that many in Coeur d'Alene, thank goodness, that are all long-term rentals? They look horrible. They don't get kept up. The people that own those homes don't care. The people that own short-term rental do care, mostly because they have to look beautiful, because they have to market them. It's a business. So those homes that were once a short-term rental, but now because you'd only allow so many per block, are going to have to be a long-term rental, what's that going to look like? I don't think that downtown Coeur d'Alene is ever going to be an affordable place to buy a home. It's going to be stepping stones. They're going to start somewhere, and they're going to dream of owning the home on Garden or Foster. So, thank you for your time. Do you have any questions?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. I'd appreciate it if we didn't applaud. This is not the venue to do that. Teresa Sandburn didn't indicate whether you wanted to speak? Not at this time. Okay. James Sago did not indicate you wanted to speak? No. Buck Storm? Nope. I have Bob and Sandy Litterman, and did not indicate you wanted to speak. Carol Sago? Nope. I don't have anyone else. Did anyone else come in that wants to speak that didn't sign up? Okay. That's it for public testimony. Any other input from staff before I close public testimony and bring it to commission. Heard a lot of stuff. I'm sure we'll have discussion about some things.
So I know in a normal public hearing, this would be rebuttal time, but
But,
I
yeah.
just wanted to clear up just a couple things. Again, to reiterate that the proposal tonight is about that 14-day exemption, and the penalty section is for those operating without a permit. So the penalty section isn't related to any sort of noise complaint, parking complaint, garbage complaint. That has not been changed in the code. That's that existing $100 fine available, and like they said, we have not imposed that fine as of yet. So we aren't addressing that yet. That can be part of a future conversation once we have a little more statistical information. So just to reiterate, this item came forward at council's direction. They did offer up the ad hoc committee, and so we did have some dialogue with the ad hoc committee members. So I think you can speak up if you want, but to know that staff is very open to input, and we're just looking for some direction as of that March 1st deadline approaches. And regarding the fees, we really try with all of our business licenses to have all of the costs associated with that business license incorporated in the fee. So whether we need to buy a new software program or hire another code enforcement officer, those costs would be distributed throughout those business licenses. So with that, anything from Hillary and?
It's the only other thing to clarify. It sounded like there was maybe a little confusion on the third bullet point. So that is not a proposal to cap the number of short-term rental permits by block. It's a proposal to pause any new permits through the March timeframe. So the proposal is to only issue the renewals past the 21st. And it's correct. And that's not really for you guys to weigh in on. That's just a kind of a clarifying point. So yours are really just the top
Hold on,
two
I'll
are
get
kind of
you.
part of the code amendment. Your recommendation to council is the request today.
Okay. Renata, you got anything more to add?
We're available for questions.
Yeah, hold on, I'm sure. Peter, go ahead.
I have this moratorium, I'm not so sure that's a misnomer. To me, it's a misnomer. What is it you're trying to do? You're having a lapse of time in here of a certain duration, is that right?
Well, let me just, I was on the ad hoc committee, and the reason I believe we're in the middle of all this, and I know that there's emotion involved in this, and I have to admit, the city is trying to do the best it can. We're not stopping short-term rentals. That is not the intention of the city. All the other stuff is just part of the big picture of what we gathered from other cities, fees, penalties, and things like that. The reason I believe we're here is because we have not gotten all the information from the agency that said we were going to get it at a certain date and before March 1st. That did not happen. I'm not apologizing for it. City isn't apologizing for it. It's just the way things are. So we want to get all the right information, just like you want all the right information. Why is complaints not been told to us? Why is this? All your concerns, we hear those. And we're trying to get all the information so we can make a right decision. And you're going to have plenty of time to come back and voice your opinion in an orderly manner, providing you address the issues that are here and not just talk about things that aren't related to what we're trying to do for the city of Coeur d'Alene. Is that kind of really why we're here? Because we just haven't gathered the information and couldn't just continue the way we were going? Correct me if I'm wrong a little bit.
Yeah, that's one piece of it. You know, we see the trending going up, and those concentrated zones that we've already identified south of I-90 are getting more and more permits. So it's really asking for council to say, what do you want to do? We have a March 1st renewal date. Permits are good for a 1-year period of time. So what do you want to do? And we feel as staff, the recommendation really is to stop any new permits coming through the door for that period of time. Allow the renewals, the people that are legal, currently existing, to continue to operate under current codes while we work on developing those new codes that might address those concentration issues. So, you know, that's really, we're one phase in a several phase process, and our really hope is that we can get the information from Granicus, have some group meetings with stakeholders, and really start to look at what are the issues that are affecting neighborhoods, and how can we address it together, and what's the best thing to bring forward for the new permits coming in the future.
And
We
I
have
also-
to stop somewhere, and, sorry.
Yeah. Oh, let me add one more thing. We've heard a lot of, why are we doing this? But we've got a lot of letters, and we have to protect neighborhoods. People have rights to live in a neighborhood just as you have rights to do a short-term rental. So we have to look at both sides of the thing. And today we heard a lot of opposing statements, but there's a lot of support to do some changes to protect neighborhoods, because there are a lot of neighborhoods that are getting more affected than other neighborhoods. Go ahead, Brianna. And I appreciate if you don't speak over me while you're in the audience. Thank you. Be respectful. Go ahead.
Oh, are we still addressing staff questions and?
Yeah, go ahead.
I am also on the ad hoc committee and have sat in, and first of all, there are a lot of positive comments about the value of the rental community into the economy, and I'm sorry if that doesn't seem evident. I think we're focusing on how to balance sort of integrity of neighborhoods and protecting those who live in neighborhoods with those who are following the rules and the economic value that the tourism industry brings. So that's one. Two, those of you that we've heard from are clearly following the rules and invested in maintaining the integrity of the neighborhoods, which we appreciate. In the ad hoc committee, we have heard from law enforcement, code enforcement, of what is happening in some of those highly concentrated areas that is in fact degrading. And one of the reasons I think we are putting a pause is, some gentleman mentioned this is 90% problem, is that we didn't want to come out with a solution that wasn't aligned to the problem, but to better define and quantify and specify the problem, we needed the data from Granicus, input from the city department, so that we tailor it to balance those values of property rights, people following the rules, the economic value of rentals, with protecting neighborhoods and integrity. So I don't know if we don't have maybe presented data, but that's part of why we've engaged Granicus, right, is to actually pinpoint where some of the issues are. But there are, as Chairman Messina mentioned, and I don't know if staff wants to weigh in, there have been complaints, there have been observations about degradation of neighborhoods. So it may not be evident to those who are experiencing the vibrant downtown community, but there are areas where, and residents who feel differently. So I don't know if staff can address those.
Well, I think you bring up a good point we failed to bring up earlier, is the law enforcement perspective. And they're talking about, when you have long-term owners, some incident occurs, they can knock and talk with the owners and have some community awareness about what those issues are and maybe who was in the area that witnessed it. They're going to speak more about it at the council meeting level, but that was part of some of the discussion of what is that neighborhood integrity and how it helps to be a community. But certainly, yes, there are plenty of great long-term, short-term rentals in town. We're not trying to disparage any of those. We are looking for solutions going forward with a national issue that all cities are struggling with. How do you find that balance, and what are the right things to regulate? I mean, is it occupancy? Is it car parks? Is it garbage? Is it noise? I mean, we've got all of that to come.
Renata, I've heard lots of different, issues, and especially the department. There's over 300 pages of public comment that we were all, received a link to. So in addition to who's in the room today, and there's definitely lots of different sides of it. But I have heard over this issue or others, the city usually has a fairly friendly approach, I guess, of first, you haven't used the $100 fine that you have the ability to. Usually it's an educate, come in, we're going to tell you, that's not really the way it works, and here's the form you need, or here's what you need to do, and kind of that approach. And I appreciate that, because I do think with some of these issues, you have had press releases, and there are clearly people in the room that have heard about this, but there will be people that if you were to stop accepting new permits at the beginning of March, I think there are people that really didn't know. There are people that did know that will say they didn't know, but there are people that really didn't know. And so if you were to knock on their door or send them a letter saying, hey, there's a $1,000 fine for being out of compliance, which I 100% agree. If people aren't following the rules, there should be a consequence. But if you were to do that, then they're going to be like, oh my goodness, okay, what do I need to do? And I didn't know, how do I make it right? And there will be, the answer will be, there's not a way to make it right because we have a stop right now. And so we're coming out of the slowest season of the year for most of these people. They're coming out and looking forward to that income. And so the timing of this is really hard. I struggle with that because we don't have the data, and I want to make good decisions with good data, is you're going to have this stick of a higher fine, which I think most people are in support of, but you have no way for people to come into compliance. And whether one neighborhood, it might be 60%, but another one, they might be the only one in that neighborhood, and they would have, if that is the end kind of balance you're trying to figure out, in October, you would have said, okay, well, yeah, you only have one in your neighborhood, so we would have approved that, and they missed out on that income for the entire 2023 summer, which they may not be able to float. They might not want to put a long-term renter in. There might be other situations they're balancing why the short term is the right fit for their income there. And so I see the struggle, but I also feel like since we don't have the data to make a really educated decision, is 512 the right number? Is 862 the right number? Probably somewhere in between, probably dependent on the neighborhood. I think we all have kind of our own threshold of what that looks like, but I do struggle with the way that sits in the way the season works for us, since we are very seasonal in that, and that there are people that legitimately may have not been under a rock and not known, and usually our friendly approach of let's educate and do the things that are important with the permit. So important with the permit and the process that's been in place in 17 is kind of like, we want you to have a fire safety plan, and we want you to have windows that are egress that people are sleeping in, and all those things. They're not going to have the opportunity to do those things and be a good vacation rental owner. And they're either probably going to try to keep doing it just so they can pay their bills, or, I mean, so I struggle with that at this time, I guess, because I feel like it's really hard to make like a really solid decision. And I think to change an ordinance, I personally feel like we need to have that solid data behind it. I guess that's my opinion. But.
Okay. Before we're getting into the discussion here, and have Renata kind of just say what she needs to say. We also have police here, and Renata, if we can maybe have police come up and address some of the issues about complaints, because I've heard it on the ad hoc committee how we do, we don't track. And
Yeah.
So come
And
on
if
up.
I could just say really quick on the licensing front, most cities do have a license, and anytime somebody starts a business operation, they usually contact the city first. And I think we've been trying for at least the last 12 months or more to really get the information out, put it out there. The Vacation Rental Alliance will tell all their people, the real estate people now know to tell all their people. So we're just saying, we're maybe trying to find a way to draw a line somewhere, and that's what we're gonna ask council's input on, and what they wanna do. Do they wanna give some flexibility, or I don't know. So there you go.
Thanks, Renata.
Maybe introduce yourself. Sorry.
Hi to everybody that's here. I'm sorry, I understand you raising your hand. My name is Sergeant Jared Renault, and I work for the police department. I've been there for about 16 years and have worked for the city for that long. Currently, I work and with some of our code enforcement folks and some of the other folks at the police department. But as far as questions...
Let me interrupt you. You're also on the ad hoc committee.
I was also on the ad hoc
Thank
committee,
you.
yes. And so I've been involved in some of the discussions that we've had related to short-term rentals. And I want to reiterate that it hasn't been anybody's position that's been part of the committee to try and impact the business that short-term rental owners run as part of their business and to have a negative impact for that. And so we've had a significant amount of discussion on that related specifically to the compliance aspect for the owners that have short-term rentals that are not compliant. The police department doesn't have a mechanism where we can verify at this point whether somebody is operating a short-term rental or not. There's people that operate short-term rentals throughout the year. We don't have personnel to sit and monitor constantly the different short-term rental websites, and we don't have the technology to be able to do that and to be able to issue fines per se without a lengthy investigation. And the nature of a short-term rental, but having people in and out quickly, really prevents us from being able to conduct some of those investigations. The people that have spoke today, this afternoon, are I'm sure all of you are the ones that abide by the rules, and we're very grateful for that. We're not trying to impact the people that are having that, and we do want to enforce the people that are operating without or on the outsides of the permit process. We've talked, there's been a lot of discussion about the neighborhood integrity and the different aspects related to complaints, perhaps within individual neighborhoods. And there's a couple things that I would say. The number of complaints that the police department receives as it relates specifically maybe to parking problems or noise complaints, they come in, but they're probably pretty small. And so I couldn't sit here and tell you related to that specifically. There's not a way for us to track that as far as is it related to a specific short-term rental or a regular residence. We don't have a mechanism that differentiates because we can't track which ones are not permitted as short-term rentals. And so there isn't a way for us to adequately track that. Overall, those number of complaints are fairly small. But I can tell you that the difference between when we talk about the neighborhood integrity and the sense of community within neighborhoods and why the police department is vested in or has an interest in this is because there's a difference between somebody that's willing to file a complaint because somebody's having a problem or they're unable to sleep, maybe it's a noise complaint tonight, or if we were out talking in neighborhoods to neighbors to find out if they actually like having a short-term rental in their neighborhood or if they feel it detracts specifically from the neighborhood without having necessarily a noise complaint or parking problems that are always there. Maybe it's just the in and out of people that are always coming and going from there. And I'm not saying that that's bad business or that we shouldn't have that. Our interest becomes because as a department, first of all, we all recognize, and I think everybody in here, especially those that have talked, would agree that Coeur d'Alene is an amazing place to come and be. And part of that comes from the community as a whole that we've built over the last however long Coeur d'Alene's been a city. The more that we have the transient population coming and going, detracts a little bit from the neighborhoods being able to come together. And when we're looking to work together to bring down crime and to continue to keep the city a safe place where people want to come and go, it's important to us that the specific neighborhoods are able to understand what's going on within that neighborhood. That's one of the key tools that we use to help bring down crime, to identify crime and solve different crime that's happening within the neighborhood. If we can't get people together and talk about things that are specifically happening within that neighborhood, then we lose that ability and lose those tools to be able to identify different specific crimes within that neighborhood and to work to resolve those crimes and to either prosecute people or move those to some other city. And that's really what our goal is. So I don't know if there's something else, Mr. Chairman, that you want me to address or
Whatever you'd like to share with us regarding short-term rental, that would be great. But
I think just specifically as far as the software or the partnering with the monitoring agency, it will allow us moving forward with the opportunity to enforce some of that because they do have the technology and the ability to monitor who's operating, who is permitted and who is not, and be able to enforce the ordinance as it's written and have some teeth to be able to prevent some of those that are operating without a permit to have some recourse, or those of you that do have permits, it'll keep some of those off the market, and hopefully it's a little bit better business for those of you that are operating within the confines of the law.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I have a question. So with the Granicus software, will you guys have access to that 24 hours a day? Like
Yes.
If you got a call at 2 a.m., you would have access to that
Yes.
information? Okay, that's great.
Yeah. All right, if we have no more questions of staff?
Of staff.
Okay, go ahead.
Maybe Renata, I'm not sure. If there is no cap rather than moratorium, which seems to be a scary word, if there were no cap, after February 21st, anyone who comes in for a permit, that would be permanently grandfathered? Is that correct?
No, the permit is good for a 12-month period. So a grandfather, that term would indicate like it would be associated with the property and it would go on and on and on year over year.
Right.
So no, our business licensing permits are good for a 1-year term. So they would be good for 1 year.
And are there reasons to deny a renewal?
There are some things probably set out in the code, but right now we haven't encountered that since 2017 that there'd be a reason to reject. It would probably be complaint basis. If we had a consistent issue with that property, I think 3 or more violations in a year would get you a denial.
Okay. I won't say it's a problem, but if the issue is there are 600 short-term rentals for whatever reason, if there isn't some type of limitation set, then a year from now there could be 2,000. So the issue continues to expand while we're trying to develop rules to address it, and it's kind of outgrowing us the whole way. Okay, thank you. That's all I need to know.
I have a question on reviewing the health and safety. How long does it take us to get that permitted request into an actual permit that's met the standards, for life safety, fire exiting? If we saw, 500 come at us, there's no way they could get through walking, making sure there's fire extinguishers, fire exiting out of a bedroom, how long can we anticipate that in a city that's already taxed to the limit?
That's why we've kind of set up the renewal period the way it is. So everybody submits their stuff by March 1st, and we have till the 30th to actually issue the license. It doesn't normally take staff 30 days for one permit, but we could have one that has done illegal construction. It has a new kitchen in the basement that we don't find a building permit for, and that particular one will take a lot more time to work through the hiccups.
Okay.
But generally, we can do some pretty straightforward stuff. But we do have, 2 licensed agents in municipal services, Kelly and Allison. And then when we have issues with planning and zoning, we have Sean, Tammy, and Mike to help us with those. So we are pretty limited on staff, and we try and keep it that way for economical reasons. But, it just totally depends on the submittal.
Okay.
Go ahead, Sean.
I was going to say, when we started working on this in 2017, and one of the commissioners brought it up, the light touch, as we set this up so that these could be self-sufficient and self-reliant. And so initially, and up until this point, it has been self-inspections, and you provide us the information. And so in doing that self-reliance and self-reporting, there hasn't been the ability for the city to collect that additional information for things such as violations and what the police department was just talking about. So at this point, we're able to issue the permits as quickly as they come in, and we're able to tell that it is actually a valid address and that their floor plan matches what we have on record. And so it's a pretty quick process. Kelly does a wonderful job at turning those over, and if there's ever a question, she sends us an email and says, hey, is this thing valid? Is this okay? And so at that point, staff will do a deeper dive into a unit or an application to say, is this legal or not? But our turnaround time is within a couple of weeks most of the time, but some of the permits take longer.
Thank you.
And after a year, there's no guarantee, of renewal. So if the new ordinances come into effect, like you said, if it was October, then everybody new and everybody renewing would be under that same rule.
Yeah, our hope really was that, we'd have 6 months of code development and then 6 months for people to understand the new rules and regulations and make business decisions based on the new regulations, whether they want to continue or not. That gives them plenty of time.
Okay, if we have no more questions, then I'm going to close this public hearing and bring it for further discussion go ahead, Peter.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
You had mentioned ad hoc committee, and 3 of you were on that. I think you 3 or 2 up there. Who else is on that committee?
John.
Hillary, can you address that, please?
Sure. So for Planning Commission, we have Chairman Messina, we have Commissioner Mandel, and then Commissioner Ingalls for the Planning Commission. And then for City Council, we have, we have Amy Evans, we have Kiki Miller and Dan Gukin serving on that, and then staff.
And the staff includes the police department?
That's correct.
And who else?
We have fire, police, building, municipal services, legal.
I'm a great supporter of process. Process is very important. Seems like you have a process here. I'm also embedded in planning and zoning simply by being here. And I've gotten to, I thought these three, it's John and Brennan and you? Okay. That you sit up here once a month, and you start to understand each other as it works towards a comprehensive plan, what we try to enforce. And I have great confidence of planning zone people on our ad hoc committee. Sounds to me that you have a good process here. If you have some council people on there, you have a good touch. Now, it may not, people here in the group may not feel we've covered everything, but you've got a lot of, some policymakers and some implementers on that committee. So that's good, and I assume that now that the committee is known, people can talk to them if they want to. I'm not encouraging that, but you can. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I feel great comfort now in what's before us based on the committee's work and participation. So I certainly support it.
Thank you. No, I'm sorry, I closed public testimony at this time.
I'll speak up.
Go right ahead.
Haven't had a
Everybody
chance
gets a
yet.
turn.
Haven't had a chance
I'm going to
yet.
sit back and relax.
I'm going
for a
back to
second.
this. I'm going back to this. Repeal MC 17.08. We can't track it. We can't possibly chase this dog, so I think it needs to go away. Easy. Amend MC 17.08 1050. Violate those who are not following and adhering, and we will do our best to inform them. Realtors will step up and say, if you're doing this as a short-term rental, please go down to City Hall. Check it out. And so that the penalization of those who overtly we failed to get them on board, they need to be penalized. Thirdly, the support the ad hoc committee, I do believe a pause will help all parties in this thing. We need time to sort all the stuff that's floating around. And I appreciate everyone's input. And as far as, we could do tiered pricing for the Airbnb who has one room and one bathroom and a little den. Maybe there's a tier system, but that all comes later. This is not what we're looking at today. I do have a bit of a thought, as I always do, on this last point. Because of our Idaho Code 676523, it authorizes an emergency moratorium upon the issuance of selected classes of permits, and where there is shown imminent peril to the public health, safety, or welfare. We have an onus to protect the rights of those who are permanent residential property owners. We are cut between the STRs that are transient. They don't have skin in the game. Yes, you owners do, no doubt. But I think that in order to stay within our code, we should also look at this last point as 182 days of moratorium. That's 6 months. That's what we are allowed to do under Idaho Code. If we are in imminent peril and the moratorium is valid for 182 days, that's 6 months. So what if we looked at a March 2023 to an August 2023, pause, breathe, get together to meetings, get everyone around the table who needs to be there. We've heard a lot of what you've said. Absolutely. No one fights you. Long-term rentals, yeah, they can look a little crummy. You guys have to make sure that these are rentable, that they're tickety-boo, that when people walk in, they don't walk out the door. So I understand that. But I think that if I'm wrong, Randy might support me here, the moratorium says we have the right, as part of Idaho Code, to 182 days of moratorium. Correct?
That is correct under that statute, that particular statute, which is not the only authority for moratoria.
Right. Imminent
And
peril.
again, that statute may or may not apply in this case.
may not.
But the city council makes the decision on moratoria.
But we all want to take a big
The
breath.
council has inherent power to do that.
And I'm a fact-based person too, and maybe this Granicus has it all. I don't know. But I think we have to listen to all parties, including the neighbors who are impacted by this, have to call 911, they're partying again. We need to listen to everyone. And so we need the time to do it, and that's that last point, is giving us the time. It's the grace. So whether it's March 2023 through August or March to March, I'm good with it. I think it ought to stay on the paper, and that's a discussion point for the city.
Yeah, I personally can't support the last one. I just feel like we don't have, I mean, part of gathering the data is maybe that last-ditch effort of encouraging people to file for a permit with a very significantly tenfold increase on fines. And we can still keep working on the rest as it goes along, but I don't personally, I don't know if we're separating them when we're approving them or how we're doing it, but I don't support the last one.
Again, that last point is not something you will be voting on. That is for
Okay. It's a
the city
recommendation.
council.
We're just trying to move this along to city council.
Because we can make a recommendation with or without a support of a certain one item or two, or however you want to do it. Other discussion?
Yeah,
Go
so
right ahead.
one thing. As I understand the state statute, these are allowed as a matter of right. We can't prohibit them, which no one is trying to do. And in addition, they are declared to be a residential use, which they are like a hotel is a residential use, but I'm not sure I want a hotel next to me. In my neighborhood, I have several short-term rentals. They're well-maintained. I have no problem with the short-term rentals from the standpoint of the complaints that I've heard alleged about noise and trash. I've never seen that. You're going to rent a property, you're going to take care of it to make sure it's well-maintained. But there is a residential integrity issue, and it's not trash, it's not parking, it's that you have a community of families that associate each other, they have children, they play together and so on, and all of a sudden you start interspersing it with these that are really non-residential uses there in the sense that they're not there to stay, they'll be there for a short time, and they're welcome. That's fine. I guess the issue I see coming out of all of this, and I don't have any problem, 14 days is, I don't know how you'd even regulate that. If your short-term rental is 1 day or 100 days, to me, it should apply. Penalties aren't meant to punish. Penalties are meant to ensure compliance. We know there are lots of places right now that have been operating and apparently are getting away with it. If they had to pay $1,000, they probably would be less inclined to do so. And we're not making a recommendation, but I really understand the reason to put some type of hold in place to see how many of these we really have. We can't over-regulate, but we certainly could require spacing requirements of someone so there's not every house on the block can be a short-term rental. And those are things that come out of the various meetings in the future. But I don't know how you can determine where you want to draw the line, not on how many, but how close together they can be without knowing how many there actually are. And I feel like that last item is the only way we could do that if, in fact, coming and getting a permit, basically, you keep. I mean, unless we find a reason to deny it, which we don't have, then it's valid come next August, 6 months later, whatever. I could agree to something like if instead of what we call a moratorium or cap, if it said, okay, if you come in after a certain date, you can get one for 6 months, non-renewable, or something that brings that one to an end so it's not just automatically added to the list. And I have no problem with short-term rentals. I do have them house after house after house, and I'm afraid that's what we need to try to look at and try to control without being overly controlling.
Thank you. Any comments? No. If not, I need a motion for this particular item, a recommendation or
I'll do
not,
it.
or whatever the recommendation
Yeah.
would be. Go ahead.
Okay. Let me.
There's no findings, it's just a simple.
Just a finding. Okay. Decision point. I recommend that we.
First of all, it would be as
All
we
done
state
in
up
one,
here.
all done
Yeah.
in one.
This would be just either a
I'm supposed to be a night meeting. I think better at night.
One at a time, right?
Pardon.
Each individually.
Okay. 0123 amendments to Municipal Code, Chapter 17.08, Article 10, entitled Short-Term Rentals. I recommend that we repeal MC 17.08.1030G, which allows a 14-day exemption for permits. I recommend that we amend MC 17.08.1050B, penalties to clarify violation for operating without a permit will have the following civil penalties set by resolution. By resolution by the City Council, $1,000 for the first offense, $2,000 for the second, and $5,000 for the third. I would also like to recommend that we support the ad hoc committee's recommendation for a cap on short-term rental permits to only renewals for March 2023 to 2024.
I have a motion. Need a second?
Second.
Second. Do we have any further discussion?
I would kind of hope that we would separate the 3 items if possible.
Well, I think the motion would have to be for what was presented to us with the,
You can do them separately, or you can do them together.
based
Right
on the
now, the
motion.
motion is all 3 of them.
Right.
And it's
That
been
was my second.
seconded.
Okay, so right now we have a motion for all 3 as presented to us, and I have a first and second. We have a roll call on the motion as it's stated by Commissioner Flemings.
Fleming?
Yes?
Mandel?
Yes.
McCracken?
No.
Lutrip?
Yes.
Ward?
Yes.
Messina?
Yes. Okay, hopefully we'll move forward. I ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion, second?
Yes, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, yes.